Hey, it's Lance. You know, my sister called me worthless at dinner, in front of the whole family. But that was just the beginning. The words still echo in my head, but they weren't the worst part. What she did after. Well, that's what made me finally snap. You won't believe how it all went down. Stick with me, because the truth about my family will shake you. Hook 2. My sister humiliated me in front of everyone, called me worthless. And that was just her opening act. You won't believe the shocking betrayal that followed. I kicked her out of my house, but did it fix anything? Or did it just set off a chain of events I never saw coming? I walked into my family's home that evening, the air heavy with expectation. The dining room, as always, was set with meticulous precision. Elegant tablecloth, polished silverware, the faint glow of the chandelier hanging above. It was the kind of dinner my parents insisted on hosting every few months, where they could pretend everything was perfect in our family while conveniently ignoring the cracks that had been growing for years. I had learned to expect this uneasy formality, but tonight, something felt different. The moment I stepped through the door, the coldness hit me. My sister, Isadora, was already seated at the table, her sharp eyes scanning me with that familiar, judgmental look. I could feel the distance between us, a gap that had widened over the years, filled with her condescending remarks and the little digs she took at me when no one else was paying attention. "Celine," she greeted me with a forced smile, the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. "Nice of you to join us." Her voice dripped with sweetness, but I could hear the edge in it. I forced a smile back, but it didn't reach my eyes. It never did anymore. I walked toward the table, pulling out the chair across from her. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the clinking of silverware and the quiet murmur of my parents trying to keep the conversation light. It was as if they didn't notice the tension, or maybe they didn't care. I sat down, aware of the coolness in the room, the unspoken words hanging in the air. My parents exchanged glances, but none of them spoke up. My father, seated at the head of the table, stared down at his plate, his mouth set in a thin line. My mother was fiddling with her napkin, pretending not to notice the awkwardness. It had always been like this. Isadora at the center of everything, with me hovering on the edges, a shadow in my own family. As we ate, the conversation meandered through topics I didn't care about. Work, the weather, vacations. I sat there, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach, the old familiar ache of being overlooked, underappreciated. My career, my accomplishments, had always been dismissed by Isadora as if they were meaningless. She had a way of turning every conversation into a passive-aggressive jab, her words like a dagger hidden behind a smile. "Celine, how's your little law firm doing?" Isadora asked, her voice sweet but edged with something sharp. "I imagine it's just a matter of time before you get that big case, right? The one your husband's connections will probably get for you." My pulse quickened. My breath caught in my throat. It was one of those subtle jabs, the kind that seemed innocent on the surface, but were meant to undermine me. She had done this before, over and over, belittling my hard work, making it seem as if I only had what I had because of my husband, Chris. The truth was, I had earned everything on my own, but no one cared to acknowledge it. I could feel my hands trembling slightly, my nails digging into the palms of my hands under the table. My heart was racing. I wanted to speak up, to tell her how wrong she was, to defend myself. But the words caught in my throat, choked by the weight of years of suppression. But this time I couldn't stay silent. As if on cue, Isadora took another bite of her food, glancing at me with that condescending smile of hers. "You know, I just don't understand how you put up with all this, Celine," she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're so much smarter than this. You could have done anything, but instead, you chose to stay in this little bubble, pretending you're making a difference." The sting of her words burned like fire, but something inside me snapped. I was done with this, done with the constant undermining, done with pretending to be the good, quiet sister. My hands gripped the edge of the table, the muscles in my jaw tightening. Then she said it, the words that would change everything. "You're worthless, Celine." The table went silent. I could feel the weight of the words pressing down on me, suffocating me. My mother's eyes widened, but she said nothing. My father's gaze flickered over to me, but there was no apology, no intervention. I looked at Isadora, her smug smile still plastered on her face. In that moment, everything inside me went cold. The years of feeling invisible, of being silenced, all came crashing down. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, and everyone at the table fell silent. The air felt thick, heavy with the tension that had been building for so long. "You know what, Isadora?" I said, my voice steady but filled with something new, something sharp. "I'm done. I've had enough of your bullshit." I looked around the table, but no one said a word. My parents just stared at me, their expressions unreadable. Chris looked uncomfortable, his hand frozen halfway to his glass, but I didn't care anymore. "You're not welcome here anymore," I said, my voice firm. "You've humiliated me for the last time." The room seemed to shrink, the silence stretching out for what felt like eternity. Isadora's face turned crimson with rage, her eyes narrowing. But I didn't back down. I stood my ground. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this, Celine," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you can just throw me out?" I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had said everything I needed to. Isadora stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, leaving a trail of anger and confusion in her wake. I stayed there, breathing heavily, my heart still racing. A strange sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. I had taken control. Oh, but there was also fear. Fear of the fallout. Fear of what would happen next. The silence lingered in the air as I looked at my family, their shocked faces staring back at me. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Isadora or anyone else treat me like this anymore. The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. It had been hours since Isadora stormed out of the house, and yet the weight of what had happened still hung in the air like a thick fog. The dim lighting from the overhead fixture did nothing to ease the tension that had settled in my bones. I stood by the counter, my hands gripping the edge, trying to steady myself. Chris had barely spoken since the confrontation. He stood near the sink, his back to me, fiddling with the dishes but not really cleaning them. I could feel his anxiety, the way he was walking on eggshells, unsure of what to say, uncertain of how to comfort me. I wanted to break the silence, to tell him that I was okay, that I had finally done what I needed to do. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I was okay. The relief I'd felt when I told Isadora to leave had quickly been overshadowed by guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I wrong to stand up for myself in such a public way? Had I crossed a line that I couldn't come back from? Chris turned to face me, his eyes filled with concern. "Celine, are you sure about what you did?" His voice was soft, almost tentative, as though he was afraid of upsetting me further. I sighed, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. "I don't know. It felt right in the moment, but now, I'm not sure." I paused, running my fingers through my hair. I just couldn't keep letting her walk all over me anymore. But now I'm wondering if I've made things worse. Chris stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've been dealing with this for years. It's okay to stand up for yourself." His words were meant to comfort, but they didn't ease the tightness in my chest. I had always known that my family never saw me for who I truly was. I'd been the quiet one, the one who didn't stir the pot, the one who took whatever they dished out without complaint. But I was done with that. I was done pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Just then, my phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the silence. I picked it up, my heart dropping when I saw the name on the screen. Isadora. I stared at the phone for a moment, hesitating before I answered. Chris shot me a worried look, but I waved him off. I needed to deal with this, once and for all. "Hello?" I answered, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Celine!" Isadora's voice came through the phone, dripping with venom. "You think you can just humiliate me like that? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I could hear the anger in her voice, but I wasn't afraid anymore. "What I've done. I've finally stopped letting you walk all over me, Isadora. It's about time you heard the truth." There was a long pause on the other end, then she scoffed. "The truth? You're a joke, Celine. You've always been the quiet little sister, the one who never mattered. You think you're important now because you have some small law firm? You've always been second best, and now you've ruined everything. The sting of her words hit harder than I expected, but this time, it didn't break me. I wasn't that person anymore. I'm not second best, Isadora. I'm not your punching bag anymore either. And I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, but my resolve stronger than ever. I turned to Chris, my eyes burning with unshed tears, but I wasn't going to cry. Not anymore. I'm done being the second choice. I've spent my whole life trying to gain their approval, trying to fit into a mold they created for me, and I'm tired of it. Chris didn't say anything. He just nodded, his gaze soft but uncertain. He didn't fully understand. He wasn't part of the family dynamic that had shaped me. He wasn't the one who had been treated like a shadow in a room full of bright, shining people. The phone buzzed again, this time a message from my mother. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't help myself. The text was short, to the point. We need to talk about what happened tonight. I think you owe Isadora an apology. I stared at the message for a long moment, my stomach twisting. Apologize? For what? For standing up for myself? For finally doing what I should have done years ago? I let out a bitter laugh. My mother would always side with Isadora. She always had. I stood there, staring at the message, the anger and hurt boiling inside me, when the doorbell rang. It was too soon for anyone to be coming over, but I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Isadora. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I opened the door, and there she stood, a smug look on her face, arms crossed over her chest. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to talk," she said, her tone sharp. "You owe me an explanation, Celine. You can't just throw me out of your house like that. You've destroyed this family. You think you can just walk away from everything?" I felt the old familiar feeling rise in me, the need to shrink, to apologize, to make things right with her. But I shook it off. I wasn't that person anymore. Destroyed the family. "You've been destroying me for years, Isadora," I said, my voice calm but fierce. "You think you can manipulate everyone around you, and I'm supposed to just take it. Not anymore." She sneered, stepping forward. "You don't know what you're talking about. I've always looked out for you. But now, you've crossed a line, Celine. You've ruined everything." I stood tall, meeting her gaze without flinching. "No, Isadora, you've ruined everything. And I'm not going to take it anymore." The air between us crackled with tension. For a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she turned on her heel, storming out of the house. I stood there for a moment, watching her go, the anger and fear still simmering in my chest. But it was different now. I had taken control. I closed the door behind her, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was done being the quiet, invisible one. I was done letting Isadora and my family walk all over me. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. I sat on the couch, staring at the family photos scattered across the coffee table. The images were a facade, a reminder of a life that wasn't mine, or at least not one I'd ever truly been a part of. The smiles, the perfect holidays, the good times, each one felt more distant than the last. I reached out and picked up an old photo of my sister and me from when we were kids. In it, I was beaming, an innocent child still searching for approval. Isadora was standing next to me, looking perfect as always, the golden child. It stung now, more than ever, to realize how much I'd always been second place in this family. My fingers ran over the edges of the frame as I heard Chris moving around the house, his footsteps soft but purposeful. I could hear him in the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets, trying to find something to do. It wasn't lost on me that he'd been quiet all day. The quiet in the house was almost as thick as the air after Isadora left. I had kicked her out, sure. But now what? The phone on the coffee table buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Isadora. "We need to talk. This can't just end like this, Celine. I slammed the phone back down without replying. I couldn't talk to her right now. I was tired of listening to her, tired of letting her twist everything to suit her narrative. But there was something more pressing in the back of my mind, something that gnawed at me more than her insults. I needed to confront my past. My family's secrets were suffocating me, and I needed to know the truth. With a deep breath, I stood up and walked over to the desk drawer. It was the place where I kept a few old things, scraps of memories, things that didn't quite fit in anywhere else. I pulled it open, rummaging through a few papers and old cards, until I found a yellowing envelope. It was from my mother, one of the old letters she had written to me when I was in college. I had never read it before. It was one of those things she had kept from me, things she never expected me to uncover. I opened it slowly, the paper crinkling in my hands, and began reading. The letter was from my mother, but it wasn't addressed to me. It was a note to someone else, likely to my father. The words in the letter made my stomach churn. It spoke of things I didn't understand: manipulation, power plays, secrets about how the family had come into wealth. The letter mentioned something about my father's shady business dealings, a deal that had put him in debt to some unsavory people, and how my mother had been forced to stay silent about it. I set the letter down and ran my hand over my face. Everything I'd believed, everything I thought was true about my family, felt like a lie now. My father had built his empire on lies and deceit. It wasn't about hard work or integrity. It was about manipulation, control, and a family bound by secrets. I shook my head, the weight of this revelation sinking in. My entire life, I had been made to feel inferior, like I was a second-class citizen in my own family. And it wasn't just Isadora who had kept me in the shadows. It was my parents, too. They'd allowed her to take control, to take the lead, and I had just been the quiet, dutiful daughter. This wasn't just about Isadora anymore. It was about breaking free from a family that had never seen me for who I was. Later that afternoon, I drove to a cafe to meet my aunt. She had always been on the outside of the family, the one who refused to play the game they all played. I knew she had the answers. She'd been there when my father's dealings were exposed, and I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. We sat across from each other, the silence between us uncomfortable. She looked older than I remembered, but there was still a spark in her eyes. I took a deep breath before I spoke. "Aunt Rachel," I began, "I need to know what happened. What's the real story about Dad and all this? About the family?" Rachel's eyes softened and she sighed, the weight of the truth heavy in the room. "Celine," she started, "you have no idea how much I wish I could have protected you from all of this. But it's time you knew." She leaned in closer, her voice lowering. "Your father, he was involved in things that no one should ever get into. The family's wealth wasn't built on good intentions. Your mother kept quiet because she was afraid. She was afraid of losing everything: her status, her comfort, and maybe even you." My heart raced as Rachel continued. She told me about the shady deals my father had made, the money he had made through dishonest means, and how everything had been kept under wraps. My mother had known, but she had been forced to stay silent, to play the role of the perfect wife, even if it meant lying to her own children. "You were never meant to be part of this empire," Rachel said quietly. "They made sure of that. Your father wanted to keep you hidden. You were an accident, Celine, and your existence was something they tried to erase." I felt the blood drain from my face. An accident? How could they have treated me like this? All my life I had been made to feel like I wasn't good enough. But the truth was, my whole existence had been a burden to them. I left the cafe in a daze. My head was spinning, and for the first time, I saw my family for what they truly were: manipulators, liars, people who had used me as a pawn in their game of wealth and power. When I got home, Chris was there, waiting for me. He could see the look on my face. "What happened?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't keep it in anymore. "Everything, Chris. Everything I've ever known about my family is a lie, and I'm done with them. I can't be part of this anymore." His eyes widened, and I saw the conflict in his face. He wanted to comfort me, but he didn't know how. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I can't do this anymore. I need you to support me, or this is over." The words hung in the air between us. I could feel the weight of the decision I was making. "I need you, Chris, but if you're not going to stand by me, then I'll walk away. I'm not going to let them control me any longer." I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the cool glass reflecting a face that no longer seemed familiar. It was strange to think how much had changed in just a few days. The woman staring back at me didn't resemble the one I had been just a week ago. I used to seek approval, to live in the shadow of my family's expectations. But now, all of that seemed so distant. My mind was racing, thinking back to the dinner, the words that were thrown at me, the cruelty of Isadora, and the shock of having finally stood up for myself. My heart still beat loudly in my chest from that confrontation. It felt like I was on the edge of something much bigger. I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me, but there was no turning back now. "You can't go back to being who you were," I thought, staring at my reflection. The girl who had always been second, who had been ignored and used for the sake of the family, was gone, and she wasn't coming back. A voice echoed in my mind, the voice of the past, the voice that reminded me how much I had sacrificed just to fit into their mold. All those years, I had believed that love and respect were conditional, but I had never realized just how much I had given up to be accepted. The truth hit harder than any insult or betrayal. My entire existence had been a series of compromises, and I had let it happen, but that was over. As I turned away from the mirror, I heard a soft knock at the door. I knew it was Chris. "I'm here," he called, his voice uncertain, almost afraid to enter. I walked over to open the door, my heart heavy with the weight of the conversation we needed to have. Chris stood there, looking more lost than I had ever seen him. "Celine," he began, his voice strained. "Are you okay? That was a lot, what you did back there?" I took a deep breath and stepped aside to let him in. "I'm fine," I lied, though the words felt foreign on my tongue. The truth was, I wasn't fine. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and furious at how easily I had been manipulated by my own family. But I didn't need his pity. Not now, not anymore. He hesitated before sitting down on the edge of the bed. I don't know how we got here, Celine. You've been through so much. I want to support you, but I don't know how. I don't want to lose you." I could feel my chest tighten. Chris had always been my rock, the one person I thought I could count on no matter what. But right now, he felt more like a bystander than a partner. He had seen it all, the way my family treated me, and yet he hadn't done enough to fight for me. "You didn't support me when I needed you most," I said quietly, my voice trembling with emotion. "You've stayed neutral, Chris. Neutral isn't good enough anymore. You have to choose. You have to stand by me." He opened his mouth, probably to apologize, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No, not now. I've spent my whole life seeking approval from people who never gave a damn about me, my family, my career, you. It's all been built on lies. I need you to decide, Chris. Either you stand by me and fight this with me, or I'm done." I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle to find the right words, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. The tension in the room was suffocating, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Chris seemed to shrink into himself, a sense of helplessness washing over him. I couldn't help but wonder if he had always been this passive, if I had just been too blinded by love to see it. "Celine, His voice broke, and for a brief moment, I thought he might reach for me, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. Not after everything. "Don't," I cut him off. "I can't keep pretending that we're okay when everything around me is falling apart. If you can't fight for me, then what are we even doing here?" The silence that followed felt louder than any argument I had ever had with him. I turned away and walked towards the window, looking out at the dimly lit city below. The reality was settling in. I was alone in this fight. Even Chris, the man I thought I could rely on, wasn't fully with me. And yet, there was something liberating in that realization. A soft buzz from my phone interrupted my thoughts. I picked it up and saw that Isadora had sent me a message. "We need to talk." This can't be how it ends, Celine. Not like this. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the familiar anger rise inside me. I had already kicked her out. I had already set my boundaries. But this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about me taking control of my life, my family, and my future. I wasn't going to let Isadora or anyone manipulate me anymore. I stood there, phone in hand, contemplating the consequences of what was to come. A part of me wanted to give in, to apologize and make peace. But a much bigger part knew that peace came at too high a price. I had been silenced long enough. It was time for the truth to surface. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Chris standing up behind me. "I'll support you," he said, his voice quieter now. "But if you need space, I'll give it to you. Just don't shut me out." I turned around to face him, taking in his words, trying to gauge if he meant it. But the damage had already been done. I had spent so many years playing along with the family's games, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife. But now, I had to decide who I was going to be, and I wasn't sure if Chris could be part of that journey anymore. I walked past him and grabbed my coat. "I'll be back later," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing for certain. I was done being the person my family expected me to be. I stood outside the family estate, the grand mansion looming before me like a fortress. The house, with its elegant architecture and vast windows, had always been a symbol of power. But now, it felt cold. The walls that once provided comfort now seemed to mock me, reminding me of the weight of everything I had been through. My pulse quickened as I stepped closer to the door. This dinner, this was it. The final test. Inside, I could already feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the grand table set for the evening, it was the undercurrent of manipulation, deceit, and the broken pieces of our family dynamic that would fill this room. It felt like stepping into a war zone, and I was the only one ready to fight. I had always been the quiet one, the one who hid in the shadows, seeking approval from everyone, bending to their whims and demands. But tonight, I wasn't that girl anymore. I was done being the perfect daughter, done pretending that everything was fine when it was far from it. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but it was controlled now. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was clarity. Walking through the cold, empty halls of the house, I found myself passing by the family portraits. It was a reminder of what I had been to them, the afterthought, the one who never quite fit. There I was, a smiling little girl in a school photo, her face filled with innocence. But behind those smiles, there was always a sense of being overlooked, of being pushed aside for someone else. I was the shadow behind Isadora's brilliance. As the dinner hour approached, I could hear the faint sounds of voices coming from the dining room. Isadora, no doubt, was preparing her next round of manipulative tactics. This was her arena, her stage, and tonight she would try everything to pull me back into her game. But I was ready to expose her for what she truly was. And dinner was served, and as I sat down at the table, I could feel every eye on me. The air was thick with tension. The silverware clinked against the fine china, but the sound didn't bring any comfort. It only amplified the silence between us. Isadora sat across from me, her face a mask of calm that barely hid her irritation. I could feel her eyes scanning me, waiting for me to back down, but I wasn't going to. "So Celine," she began, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness, "how are things at work? Still managing to keep things afloat without too much of Chris's help?" Her words cut deeper than I expected, and I felt the anger rise, but I kept it in check. This was a test. She was baiting me, trying to make me react. But tonight, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I glanced at Chris, hoping for some sign of support, but all I saw was hesitation. He looked uncomfortable, torn between the family loyalty he'd always known and the woman he married. His eyes darted to me, then back to the table. His silence spoke volumes. Isadora wasn't done. She had that glint in her eye, like a predator circling its prey. "You've always been so eager to prove yourself, haven't you? But tell me, Celine, how many times have you failed? How many times have you relied on your husband's name to get ahead?" Her words were sharp, but I could feel the familiar sting of them, the years of pent-up resentment bubbling to the surface. This wasn't just a dinner. This was the culmination of everything I had endured, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. You know, Isadora, I said slowly, keeping my voice even, you've always had a way of twisting the truth, haven't you? Making everyone else look like the problem while you sit back and manipulate everything around you. Isadora's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly regained her composure. What are you talking about? I didn't give her a chance to recover. I know about the deal you tried to make behind my back, Isadora. You tried to steal my ideas, undermine everything I've worked for. The room went silent. The tension was palpable, and I could feel the eyes of my parents, my husband, all on me. Isadora's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she turned the tables. You're the one who's always been the problem, Celine. Always wanting more, never satisfied. The family would have been better off without you. Her words were venomous, meant to break me, but I wasn't broken anymore. I stood up from the table, my hands trembling, but my resolve unshaken. No, Isadora, you've always tried to control everything, and I've let you. But no more. I am not your pawn. Chris didn't speak. His face was pale, and I could see the weight of his indecision in his eyes. But this wasn't his fight. It was mine. I looked around the table, the faces of my family frozen in shock. You've all treated me like I'm nothing. Like I don't matter, but I do matter. And I'm done. I will no longer play by your rules. I'm done being the dutiful daughter. Done being the quiet one. If you want to keep playing your games, you do it without me. My voice trembled, but I held my ground. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it together, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control. Chris stood up too, but his words were soft, almost pleading. Celine, don't do this. Please, just calm down. No, I interrupted, my voice breaking. I can't pretend anymore. I can't be the perfect daughter, the one you want me to be. I can't. Not for you, not for anyone. I turned to Isadora, my voice low but firm. You've won, Isadora. You've broken me, but you haven't defeated me. I'm walking away, and I'm never coming back. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was the only thing I could do. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, but it didn't soothe me. Instead, it reminded me that I had just taken the first step towards freedom. But I also knew that this was far from over. The battle for my life, my identity, had just begun. The air inside the cabin was still, almost suffocating. The only sound was the rustle of trees outside, the soft wind brushing against the windows. I sat on the worn couch, staring out at the lake, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, tangled in the chaos of my family, the betrayal, and the choice I now had to make. This cabin, this quiet little haven by the water, was meant to be a refuge. Yet the peace I sought was elusive. It was the calm before a storm that I couldn't avoid. The dinner with Isadora had shattered something inside me. Her manipulation, her coldness, had peeled back the layers of everything I had allowed myself to believe. I had been so desperate for their approval, for my family's love, but I couldn't keep lying to myself. Not anymore. I felt tired, emotionally drained, but there was also clarity. I'd spent so many years living up to others' expectations, bending myself into someone I wasn't, all for the sake of being accepted. I realized that I'd let them take my voice, my identity. I had been invisible, always living in the shadow of Isadora, playing the part of the dutiful daughter, trying to be the good girl they wanted me to be. But now, I was done. The silence in the room was both comforting and suffocating. As I sat there, my thoughts drifted back to the moments that had defined my existence. My father's silence, my sister's cruelty, Chris's indecision. I had been overlooked, undervalued, and it had taken its toll. But now, for the first time, I felt free to choose my own path, to take control of my life. I looked out the window at the darkening sky. The weight of the decision I had to make pressed down on me. I knew that no matter what I chose, there would be consequences, but I couldn't keep living for them. And just as I was starting to believe I could breathe again, I heard the knock on the door. When I opened the door, there stood Chris, looking every bit the man I once thought I could rely on. His eyes were filled with apology, but there was an underlying tension in his stance. "Celine," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "I need to talk to you." I stepped back, unsure of what to expect. His sudden appearance wasn't something I had planned for, and to be honest, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what he had to say. The man who had promised to stand by me, the man who had failed to take my side when it mattered most, now wanted to fix things. I wasn't sure if I could let him back in. "I'm sorry," he began, his words heavy with regret. "I've been thinking about everything, the dinner, the family, and I realize I failed you." I crossed my arms, feeling a rush of anger and sadness mix within me. "You didn't just fail me, Chris. You stood by and watched it all happen. You didn't protect me. You didn't even try." His face faltered. "I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't understand." "You didn't understand?" I interrupted, my voice shaking with frustration. "You didn't understand that I was drowning? That they were suffocating me? You've known how manipulative they are. You've seen it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his eyes searching mine. "I didn't know how deep it went. I'm sorry." His apology felt hollow, words without meaning, like so many before. He didn't understand. He never would. I turned away, trying to calm the anger rising inside me. The tears that had been threatening to spill suddenly felt heavier. I've spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, trying to hold everything together, trying to be the person they wanted me to be. But it hasn't worked. None of it. And you've just stood there, too afraid to choose a side. Chris's voice cracked as he stepped closer. "I love you, Celine. I'm here for you. I want to make things right." I looked at him then, really looked at him. The man I had loved, the man I had believed in, seemed like a stranger now. I wanted to believe his words, but I couldn't anymore. The damage had been done. "No, Chris," I said, the finality in my voice cutting through the silence. "This isn't just about us. It's about my whole life. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep sacrificing who I am for you, for them." His eyes widened, and I could see the fear there, the realization that I wasn't just talking about our marriage. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I can't live like this anymore. I'm walking away." His expression shattered, and for a moment, I saw him, truly saw him, in the way I used to. The man I had married, the one who had been so much a part of my dreams, was breaking before me, and it hurt. It hurt more than I could say, but I had already made my decision. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you and me. This is about everything I've been through. I'm not going to keep pretending. I'm not going to keep hiding who I am." Chris's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw him truly defeated. "You really want to leave? Leave everything? Leave me?" I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. "I have to, Chris. I can't do this anymore." He tried to say something, but the words died in his throat. The space between us grew, the distance becoming too great to bridge. I turned and walked outside, my footsteps slow but deliberate. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying the scent of the lake into the night. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting the cool air fill my lungs. The weight of my decision hung in the air like a fog. I had let go, of Chris, of my family, of everything that had held me captive. And yet, as I looked out over the lake, I knew this was just the beginning. The wind howled in the distance, and I felt its cold sting on my face, but it was nothing compared to the coldness I had felt inside my family. This was my turning point, and I wasn't looking back. I stepped into the coffee shop, my heels clicking on the cold marble floor. The place was upscale, sleek, an odd choice for the final confrontation with Isadora. The polished surfaces and quiet chatter of the patrons felt distant compared to the storm brewing inside me. My hands, normally steady, trembled slightly as I took a seat at a small corner table, trying to keep my breathing even. It was a bitter winter afternoon, the kind that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. I felt it too, the weight of the past week, the dinner, The walk away from my old life, and now this moment. The one I had been preparing for. Isadora would walk in soon, and the tension between us would be palpable. I was tired. So damn tired. But I had to do this. No more pretending. No more playing along with the roles they'd written for me. This was my time. I glanced down at the table, trying to steady myself. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear the thrum of anxiety in my ears, but there was something else, a kind of clarity. I had already taken the hardest step by leaving. This was just the last part of breaking free from everything that had held me back. I was done hiding. Done being the quiet, obedient daughter. Done being the scapegoat. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. There was no going back now. I was ready. The door to the coffee shop opened, and I knew before I looked up that she had arrived. Her presence filled the room, her stride calculated and confident. The way she carried herself, like she owned the world. Isadora. She didn't look surprised to see me. She just smiled, that practiced smile of hers, the one she always used when she was about to play her part. "Celine," she said, her voice smooth, like we were picking up from a conversation we'd had just yesterday. "I'm glad we could finally meet." "I think it's time to talk." She took the seat across from me, her eyes scanning me like she was trying to figure out the right approach. She wasn't going to make this easy. I knew that much. "I'm not here to argue," I said, cutting her off before she could launch into whatever scripted apology she'd rehearsed. "I'm here to finish something that should have been done a long time ago." Isadora raised an eyebrow, her lips curling slightly. "Oh, and what exactly is that?" I leaned forward, steadying my breath. "I'm done playing your game, done pretending. You've spent my whole life trying to manipulate me, trying to control everything, and I'm not having it anymore." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Her face tightened, but she quickly masked it with that cold indifference of hers. "I never wanted to control you, Celine," she said, her voice laced with faux sincerity. "I've always just wanted what was best for you. You think running away from the family is the solution? You're making a mistake. You've always been too emotional to see things clearly." I felt the old anger bubbling up, but I kept it in check. "Emotional? You're the one who's been playing with everyone's emotions. You've been controlling everything for years, Isadora. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough, that I had to be perfect just to get any recognition." She flinched slightly, but then straightened, putting on her mask again. "And you've always been too sensitive. The family made sacrifices for you, Celine. We all made sacrifices. You think this," she gestured between us, her tone dismissive, "is the right way to handle things?" My blood ran hot, but I wasn't about to let her have the upper hand. "You made sacrifices so you could build your empire, not for me, not for anyone but yourself." Isadora's eyes narrowed, her smile faltering. "And this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family? By throwing everything away? Family?" I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "You don't get to call it family anymore. You've been lying to me for years. You've been keeping me down, telling me I wasn't worth anything. And now you want me to just roll over and come back?" The words hung in the air between us. I could see her trying to figure out how to regain control, but I was done giving her that power. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You're being reckless, Celine. You think Chris is going to stick by you when this blows up? He's not as strong as you think. He's just as weak as you." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. Instead, they solidified my resolve. "You've been pulling the strings for too long," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I've let you. But not anymore. You're not going to control me, and you're not going to control Chris either." She shot me a look, her gaze dark with frustration, but she didn't say anything. For a brief moment, I saw the cracks in her perfect facade. "I'm not the one who's been destroying everything, Isadora. That's been you. You've been manipulating everyone, and I'm not going to be your pawn anymore." She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You think this is over? You think I'm going to let you go that easily?" I stood as well, meeting her gaze head on. "Yes, it's over. And I'm walking away." Isadora's lips curled into a venomous smile. "You'll regret this." You'll regret leaving everything behind. But you're right about one thing. This is the end. As she turned to leave, I felt a rush of freedom, but also a strange weight in my chest. It was done. I sat back down, my heart racing. The truth had finally come out, and it wasn't going to be easy. I could feel the aftermath of the confrontation pressing down on me, but I knew what I had to do. I was free. I didn't wait for her to leave. I stood up, walking out of the cafe, leaving everything behind. As I stepped outside, the cold wind hit me, but I didn't flinch. I was done with being scared, with second-guessing my decisions. I had made my choice, and I was going to live with it. The road ahead would be tough. There would be consequences. But I was ready. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living on my own terms. I wasn't going back. I stood in my kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air, but it couldn't mask the tension in my chest. This house, my home, was supposed to feel like a sanctuary, but today, it felt like a battlefield. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Every decision, every confrontation had led to this moment, the calm before the storm. I wiped down the counter and rearranged the few items on the table, something to focus on, anything to keep me from sinking into the uncertainty clawing at my insides. I had made my choice. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Not Isadora, not even Chris. My hands trembled as I stacked the dishes, the soft clink of porcelain only heightening the silence that surrounded me. The air felt thick, oppressive. I was ready, but the enormity of it all was almost too much. Was this really happening? Was I finally standing up for myself after all these years of living in the shadow of others? I forced myself to breathe, to stay present. I wasn't the girl who hid in the background anymore. I wasn't the woman who let others control my destiny. This was it. The final confrontation. The doorbell rang. The sound was almost deafening in the stillness, a clear signal that the time had come. My heart rate spiked, but I stayed rooted. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the door, every step heavy with the knowledge that everything would change after this. I opened the door, and there she was. Isadora, poised, confident, with that damn perfect smile of hers. "Celine," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, as if we were old friends about to catch up. "It's good to see you again." I stepped aside, motioning for her to enter, but I made no effort to greet her warmly. "Let's cut to the chase, Isadora," I said, shutting the door behind us. "I'm done with the games." She raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering for a moment, but it quickly returned. "Games. I'm only trying to help you. Why would you want to throw everything away?" I led her into the living room, the place that had witnessed years of family dynamics, both good and bad. It was as if the walls themselves knew what had happened here. The tension between us felt like it had a life of its own, thickening with every word. Isadora took a seat, but she couldn't hide her discomfort. "You've made a mistake, you know," she said, leaning back as if we were about to have a pleasant chat. "This whole thing, walking away from the family, it's going to hurt you. I'm the only one who's ever had your best interests at heart." I sat down across from her, arms crossed, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "You've always had your best interests at heart, Isadora. That's what this has always been about. Control, manipulation." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly masked it with a sigh. "You're being too dramatic, Celine. You always have been. The family is in turmoil because of your decisions. You've abandoned us." I couldn't keep the bitter laugh from escaping. "Abandoned you. You've been controlling me for years. You've used me, manipulated me, and all while pretending to care." She shot up from her seat, face flushed with frustration. "You don't know anything. You don't understand what it's like to hold everything together, to keep this family from falling apart. I've sacrificed everything for you, for all of us." "Sacrificed?" I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. "You've never sacrificed anything. You've built your empire on my back while telling me I wasn't good enough to even be seen." Her voice lowered. Dangerous. "You think you've been a victim in all of this? You think I'm the only one who's been playing games? You're wrong, Celine. You're the one who's abandoned your responsibilities." You think you can just walk away from everything we've built? I felt the anger rising, but I pushed it down, focusing on the truth that had been buried for so long. You've manipulated everyone, Isadora. You've turned the whole family against me. And now you think you can guilt me into coming back? It's not happening. I'm done. For a moment, there was silence between us. Isadora seemed to shrink under the weight of my words, but then she regained her composure. You think you're strong enough to stand on your own? To leave us all behind? The family will never accept you. I held her gaze, unflinching. The family doesn't exist for me anymore. Not when it's been built on lies, manipulation, and guilt. I'm walking away, Isadora. I'm finally free. She stood there, speechless for a long moment before her face contorted with fury. You'll regret this. You think you're the only one who's had it hard? You've been too weak to see the truth. I've been the one holding this family together, and you're just throwing it all away. I didn't flinch. No, you've been controlling everything, and I'm not playing along anymore. The words hung in the air between us. Isadora opened her mouth to say something else, but she stopped. Her face twisted, as if she had just realized something. Then, suddenly, she seemed to shrink back. I'm done here, she said, her voice low and tight with frustration. You'll regret this, Celine. You'll regret everything. She turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. As she stepped outside, I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring after her. The weight of the decision was still heavy on my chest. But there was something else, too, a deep sense of relief. I had done it. I had finally taken control. I didn't look back as I closed the door behind me. I sat by the window, the soft glow of the evening sun casting long shadows across my living room. It had been a week since the confrontation with Isadora, and now, in the quiet of my home, I could finally breathe. The chaos of the past few months felt like it belonged to someone else, not me. There was peace here, real, solid peace. I stared out at the backyard, where the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. The view was beautiful, tranquil. For the first time in so long, I felt free. The weight of the years, the endless manipulation, the expectations, it was all gone. I was free. But even in this moment of calm, I couldn't ignore the echoes of everything that had happened. The emotional abuse, the toxic family dynamic that had consumed so much of my life. It all felt distant now, but it had left its mark. A flash of memory came to me, an image of that moment when everything clicked. The moment I realized that I was strong enough to walk away from it all. That night, when I'd stood up to Isadora and told her I wouldn't be her pawn anymore, that was the turning point, the first time I'd truly chosen myself. The realization hit me hard then, as it did now. I was done with living under someone else's thumb, done with the lies, the guilt, the expectations. I could finally let go of the past. The sound of the door opening broke my thoughts. Chris was home. I didn't need to turn around to know it was him. I felt his presence behind me, the weight of his footsteps on the floor. He had been different since the confrontation, more attentive, more remorseful. He had apologized countless times, but I hadn't yet decided whether those apologies meant anything. He cleared his throat softly, a hesitant sound that filled the space between us. I've been thinking, he started, and I could hear the vulnerability in his voice. I remained silent, not sure what I was supposed to say. He came closer, standing just behind me, as if waiting for me to acknowledge him. Slowly, I turned to face him, meeting his eyes. I know I haven't been there for you, he continued, and I know I failed you. I failed to see just how much you were hurting, how much you were sacrificing for our family. For me, and I'm sorry. I nodded, taking in his words. They were sincere. I could tell that. But sincerity wasn't enough to heal what had been broken between us. I'd given so much of myself to everyone else, but what did I have left to give? Chris stepped closer, sitting beside me on the couch, his eyes searching mine. I want to fix this. I want to fix us. But I need to know. Do you still want this? Do you want to try? I sighed, letting the question linger in the air between us. What did I want? It was more complicated than I could put into words. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever trust him fully again. The foundation of our relationship had been shaken, and trust was something that couldn't be repaired overnight. But something else lingered in the space between us, something I wasn't willing to ignore. I don't know, I finally said. I need time. I need space to figure this out. And I can't do it while still carrying the weight of everything that's happened. Not just with you, but with everything. The family, the lies, the manipulation. His face softened, the weight of my words settling on him. I get it, and I'll give you all the space you need. But please, don't give up on us. The words stung, but I wasn't sure if it was because I still loved him or because I was afraid of what would happen if I did give up. I'm not giving up on you, Chris, I said quietly. But I can't keep holding on to the past either. I need to move forward. I need to stop living for everyone else. We sat there in silence, both of us lost in thought. I could feel the emotional wall I had built around myself slowly starting to crumble. But I wasn't ready to let everything go just yet. I needed more time, more space, more answers. I think we both have a lot of work to do, I said softly, standing up from the couch. But I'm willing to try. I'm just not sure where we go from here. Chris stood with me, taking my hand. We'll figure it out, together. I pulled my hand away gently, the moment of closeness feeling both comforting and suffocating. I need to figure out who I am first, before I can figure out what we are. The silence that followed was thick, but not uncomfortable. I needed this time to myself, to reclaim who I was outside of the roles I had been playing for so long. I went to the window, looking out at the peaceful scene outside. The past had been painful, but it had shaped me into the woman I was today. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let the past dictate it anymore. As I stood there, looking out at the world beyond, I made a promise to myself. I would move forward, no more looking back. The doorbell rang again, interrupting my thoughts. I turned, ready to face whatever came next. Isadora's letter was sitting on the table. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the envelope. Was I ready to face her again? The final piece of the puzzle. I slowly reached for the letter, opening it with steady hands. It was time to close this chapter for good.